we're tackling the ongoing situation in Ukraine, and I'll be honest, it's been a bit of a roller coaster, even in just the past few weeks.
Yeah, no kidding. It's one of those things where you just can't predict what's going to happen next, and every time you think you have a handle on it, something new pops up.
Exactly. And we know you're busy, so the point of these deep dives is to give you like a clear, concise look at the big picture stuff, without getting too bogged down in the weeds.
Right, because it's easy to get lost in all the noise, especially with a conflict like this. It's everywhere.
Everywhere. And it matters. What happens over there has, ripple effects.
Yeah.
So let's start with something that really jumped out at me, Zelensky's trip to the U.S.
Oh, yeah. That was unexpected.
Right. Like you don't see a wartime leader just jetting across the Atlantic every day. And then that whole thing with the canceled Trump meeting definitely added another layer to it.
For sure. Made you think, what's going on behind the scenes? But putting that aside for a second, I mean, his UN speech, the meetings with Biden and Harris, that's some serious diplomatic heavy lifting.
Yeah.
It tells you this was not just a quick PR stunt.
It felt like he was, I don't know, making a statement, like a
Yeah.
direct appeal for more international support.
Absolutely. And it kind of ties into, Lula, the Brazilian president, coming out with that peace proposal,
Mm.
which on the surface, you'd think, okay, peace talks, good idea, right?
Mm.
But Zelensky wasn't having it, flat out rejected it.
Yeah, and I can see some people scratching their heads at that, like why reject peace talks, especially now?
And that's the thing about this conflict, right? It's way more nuanced than it might seem at first glance. Zelensky obviously has his reasons, his own strategy, and understanding those is key to understanding where this whole thing might be headed.
It's a high-stakes game for sure. And speaking of high stakes, we can't forget what's happening on the ground. The bombing in Kharkiv the other day, just a brutal reminder of the human cost of this war.
Totally. It's easy to get caught up in the geopolitical maneuvering, the strategies and all that, but
Yep.
those are real people caught in the crossfire. The casualties, the trauma, that's the real tragedy here, and we can't lose sight of that.
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it? Like, behind all the political maneuvering, there are real lives being shattered.
No doubt about it. And it's a good reminder that this isn't just some abstract geopolitical game. These are real people, real families caught in the middle of it all.
And while that's happening, you've got global powers, kind of circling, trying to figure out their next move. It's a messy business.
That's putting it mildly.
Yeah.
But it highlights something really important, which is the whole idea of dueling narratives.
Right, because it's not just about what's happening on the ground, it's about how each side is portraying it to the world, right?
Exactly. Like take the U.S., for example.
But-
Biden at the UN, that was a pretty powerful speech. The message was clear. Putin messed up, Ukraine's holding strong, and we've got their back.
And then there's that new military aid package, the $375 million. Seems like they're putting their money where their mouth is.
It sends a strong message, for sure.
Yeah.
Although there has been some, chatter about potential roadblocks in Congress, funding issues and all that.
See, that's what makes me nervous, like, what if that support dries up?
It's a valid concern, no doubt, and it just shows you how internal politics, even in the U.S., can have these huge ripple effects on the global stage. But to be fair, the Biden administration has been pretty consistent in saying that they're committed to supporting Ukraine for the long haul.
Let's hope so, because the alternative is, well, pretty bleak. But, okay, let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about the U.S., what about Russia? I mean, they're singing a very different tune, right?
To put it lightly, I mean, think about it. They just passed a law allowing them to recruit suspects into the military. That's not exactly a sign of strength, is it?
It's kind of terrifying when you think about it. Are they really that desperate?
Well, it definitely raises some questions about, how sustainable their efforts really are at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you've got Trump weighing in, saying the U.S. needs to just get out, which adds a whole other layer of complexity.
Yeah, talk about a curveball, right? I mean, here's Zelensky trying to drum up support, and then you've got Trump basically saying the opposite.
It just goes to show you how divided even the U.S. is on this issue.
Mm.
And Trump's words still carry a lot of weight, whether people like it or not.
No doubt. So we've got Zelensky making his case, the U.S. kind of on board, but maybe with some doubts. And Russia, well, they seem to be getting desperate. Where does that leave us? What's the next chapter in this whole saga?
Well, that brings us to Zelensky's big idea, his victory plan. And of course, he's been pretty secretive about the details, which honestly just makes it all the more intriguing.
Everyone loves a good mystery, right? But seriously, what can you tell us about this plan? What's he hoping to achieve?
Well, based on his moves so far, it seems like a safe bet that joining NATO is a big part of it. He's been pushing for that for a while now.
Which, let's be honest, would be a pretty huge deal. But isn't that kind of a red line for Russia?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Mm.
having Ukraine join NATO would be a major shift in the balance of power. Putin sees it as a direct threat, and honestly, he's not alone.
I mean, it's like walking a tightrope, right?
Yeah.
Trying to make your country safer without poking the bear too hard.
Exactly. It's a delicate dance, to say the least. And it makes you wonder, what does victory even look like for Zelensky? It can't just be about pushing Russia back, right?
Yeah, what is the end game here? And that's what I find so interesting about this whole victory plan thing. I mean, is it even realistic? Can Ukraine actually achieve its goals, give it everything that's going on?
Well, it depends on how you define achievable. If we're talking about, like, securing a lasting peace, rebuilding the country, really solidifying their independence, those are all long-term goals. And the road to get there, it's not going to be easy. There are going to be some serious challenges along the way.
And those challenges, they go way beyond Ukraine's borders, don't they? This thing has really shaken things up globally.
Oh, absolutely. This is a global game changer. Alliances are being redrawn, economies are feeling the pressure. The whole way countries interact with each other is changing because of this. The world is watching, and the stakes are incredibly high.
So, with all that in mind, where do we go from here? What happens next? What are the different ways this could all play out? And what do they mean for Ukraine, for Russia, for everyone, really?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Mm.
I mean, one possibility is some kind of negotiated settlement, a peace deal of sorts. But honestly, with all the bad blood and mistrust, it's hard to see that happening anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, after everything they've been through, it's tough to imagine them just shaking hands and going back to normal.
Right. And that's why, unfortunately, another very real possibility is that this drags on, that we're looking at a prolonged stalemate, a war of attrition.
Mm.
It would be a humanitarian catastrophe, there's no doubt about that, but we have to be realistic about the potential for this thing to just keep grinding on.
And then there's the scenario that honestly keeps me up at night, which is the possibility of this escalating, of things spiraling even further out of control. I mean, that's a terrifying thought.
Terrifying, yes,
Hmm.
but also a very real danger, especially when you consider the potential for miscalculations, misunderstandings, things happening that nobody saw coming. Even with the best intentions in the world, all it takes is one wrong move, and things could escalate very quickly.
It's a lot to process, that's for sure. But honestly, you've done a fantastic job of breaking it all down for us, helping us understand the nuances of this incredibly complex situation. So, before we wrap up, any final thoughts for our listeners who are trying to make sense of it all?
I think the most important thing is to stay curious, stay informed. Don't just take one side's word for it. Look at all the angles. And remember, there are no easy answers here. This is a defining moment in history, no doubt, and what happens next will impact all of us for generations to come.
Couldn't said it better myself. And on that note, we'll leave you with this. Given everything we've discussed, what do you think the future holds? What needs to happen to bring about a lasting peace? It's a tough question, but one worth thinking about as we try to navigate these uncertain times. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and as always, thanks for taking this deep dive with us.